Hello, my name is Isabel Parzecki, and along with my teammates Kajal Patel and Jervin Sevillano, I would like to show you all a video presentation about the chemistry of bioluminescence in the natural world. Let's get to the introduction. We'll start off by viewing some footage from our oceans of bioluminescent organisms in action. Let me paint you a scene. It's the middle of the night, your room is pitch black. You reach over to grab your phone for the flashlight, but alas, it's not charged. It's too dangerous to walk through the dark because, obviously, there are monsters in the dark. Don't you wish you could just glow up? Well, there are actual creatures that can do that through a process called bioluminescence. Through this presentation, we would like to shed light on the fact that even though bioluminescence is an often admired natural phenomenon, many people are unaware of its fascinating chemical mechanisms, even though they've caught fireflies in jars since their childhood summers. Through this presentation, we would like to answer these questions. How and why do organisms produce their own light? And how can this ability be extended to modern biotechnological and medical research? The order of the presentation will go as follows. First, we'll start off with some terminology and examples of bioluminescent organisms that we may recognize. Second, we'll go into the chemistry of the process, talk about important compounds that are involved and how they work on the atomic and cellular levels. Third, we will look at examples of how organisms actually benefit from bioluminescence evolutionarily. And lastly, in one of the most exciting parts, we'll make deep connections between the chemical basis of bioluminescence and its properties, and how it can have incredible implications for modern scientific research. First, we must ask ourselves, what exactly is bioluminescence? Here we have an example of a nerve cell glowing up. This orange and yellow nerve cell is actually inside lantern sharks, and it controls their bioluminescence. This property actually just means that an organism is able to emit light, or a laboratory biochemical system can emit light that was derived from an organism. Of the more than 700 organisms that are known to be bioluminescent, 80% are actually marine species, and we'll get to see why exactly that is. Here are some important examples of bioluminescent organisms. The first picture shows jellyfish, the second, a squid on land, the third, fungi, and the last picture shows a firefly. We all know what that is. Next, let's get into the chemical mechanisms of bioluminescence.
So now let's discuss what the chemical reaction is that actually causes bioluminescence. This reaction is called chemiluminescence. And fun fact, due to an enzyme that we'll discuss later, the reaction is actually so efficient in releasing light that it hardly emits any heat. First, let's clear up some misconceptions. What's the difference between bioluminescence and fluorescence? Well, it actually occurs in the mechanism of producing light. In bioluminescence, you have a particle that creates its own light via chemiluminescence. It doesn't need previous light to absorb in order to produce this light. So when the photon is emitted, light is produced. On the other hand, in fluorescence, the light has to actually be absorbed in order for the particle to emit a photon and produce light. Therefore, if the illumination stops in fluorescence, then you don't have any more fluorescence. No more light is produced because the source of light is terminated. The main chemical that actually produces the light in chemiluminescence is called luciferin. luciferin is actually Latin for light bringer. This chemical is extremely important in chemiluminescence because it reacts with oxygen to produce light. Let's talk a little bit about the molecular structure of luciferin. Its chemical formula is C11H8N2O3S2. As you can see, it's got a lot of elements, so it's pretty complex. Let's try to draw it out. Here, let's draw the carbon structure. You have an OH group here, which shows that you have hydrogen bonding. Here, you have another set of carbons, a nitrogen, a sulfur, connected here, another sulfur and another nitrogen, and here it branches off a bit. You have a double bonded oxygen and another hydroxyl group, so there's more hydrogen bonding over here. This molecule thus displays the intermolecular forces of hydrogen bonding, London dispersion, and, due to the polarity seen in the N groups here, dipole-dipole. Now let's discuss the other molecules that play a role in chemiluminescence. The other extremely important chemical compound within chemiluminescence is called luciferase. Luciferase is a general term for an enzyme that, when it uses luciferin as a substrate, it can produce light when it reacts with oxygen. There are many different types of luciferases. There's firefly luciferase. There's even a special kind called Ranilla luciferase, which we'll see later is actually extremely useful in tracking the presence of pathogens in organisms. An experiment was done in tracking HIV in mice, and they used the Ranilla enzyme to do this. We'll discuss that more later when we talk about bioluminescence and biotechnology. Because luciferase is an enzyme, it is a catalyst. Catalysts are extremely integral to the reaction because they lower the activation energy and thus increase the rate of the reaction. This is also important to why the reaction hardly produces any heat because it's so efficient.
Here we have an excellent visual example of how bioluminescence works with luciferin, the light producer, and luciferase, the enzyme. The first image shows both the oxygen and the luciferase enzymes surrounding the luciferin. In the next picture, it shows how the luciferase, because it's an enzyme, will act upon its substrate, the luciferin. The luciferase will allow the oxygen to combine with the luciferin in an enzymatic reaction, and the reaction causes photons to be emitted. The oxidized luciferin becomes inactive oxyluciferin because it was oxidized, and because the photons were emitted, that light was produced and visible. Now let's talk about why bioluminescence is actually beneficial in nature for organisms that use it. There are hundreds and hundreds of different ways that cells and light-emitting molecules cause organisms to have a leg up on the evolutionary scale if they are bioluminescent. Let's talk about a few of them. In this presentation, we will be discussing defense and protection, mating and attraction, and feeding. Here's an example of a fish that is bioluminescent and is using a process called counter-illumination to disappear. At the left side of the image, the fish stands out, but on the right side, we see that the fish is made invisible. Why does this happen? This is because the light that is coming up from above the fish is acting against the fish's bioluminescence, and so it will blend in and will be safe from predators. Here are some more examples of defense and protection. Some organisms use a strong flash of bioluminescence to frighten the predator. They can also release bioluminescent structures, such as their limbs, to distract predators. And lastly, as we said before, they can use counter-illumination. Another thing that organisms can benefit from bioluminescence is the processes of mating and attraction. Here's an example of an organism called a psyllid fireworm that are found mainly on the sea floor where it is extremely dark because not enough light can get there. When they reproduce, they switch to a planktonic form, and the females use bioluminescent signals to attract males. This allows the species to reproduce more easily. And lastly, bioluminescence is very beneficial for organisms that need to feed. In this example of the Staroteuthis octopus, the plankton are attracted to the bioluminescent part of the octopus's beak, and you can see here that it's brightly yellow. The organism can thus eat more and get more prey because of its bioluminescent properties. Some other examples of this are organisms such as the anglerfish that has a bioluminescent lure on its head that is filled with photobacteria. These bacteria have bioluminescent properties and allow prey such as plankton to be attracted to it so the fish can eat. Organisms that live on the bottom of the sea floor can also use bioluminescence to see their hunting area more easily. Thus, as we can see, bioluminescence is extremely beneficial for organisms in nature. But can it help scientists as well? Let's find out.
So next we'll talk about the uses in nature. Bioluminescence serves various functions that are evolutionarily beneficial. There's a diverse array of alternative cellular functions for light-emitting molecules. The first of which we'll talk about is defense and protection. Organisms can utilize bioluminescence to protect themselves using various methods such as counterillumination, releasing bioluminescent structures to distract predators, and a strong flash of bioluminescence light to frighten predators away. Take, for example, this example here. Next we have mating and attraction. Organisms can utilize their bioluminescent abilities to attract males. Take the psyllid fireworm, for example. Females release bioluminescent signals to attract mates and hopefully find love in the deep blue sea. And finally, we have feeding. Animals can utilize their bioluminescent abilities to lure prey and make hunting areas more visible. Take, for example, this octopus right here. It has bioluminescence around its beak to attract plankton to feed on. And then you also have anglerfish, which use bioluminescence to light up its hunting area so it can find prey to feed on. Alright, now let's move on to scientific uses. Scientists can combine bioluminescence and genetic engineering to make several scientific advancements. Genetic engineering is the direct manipulation of an organism's genome. This can be used to make medical advancements in research. Scientists have genetically modified mice to have green fluorescent proteins which allow the mice to glow. And this has been used to help advance stem cell research. Scientists are also trying to sustain the environment. Scientists hope to one day make genetically modified trees to have bioluminescence so that one day they can replace streetlights. Next we have bioluminescent optogenetics, or BLOG for short. Optogenetics uses laser pulses to control any neuron in any area, and when this is combined with bioluminescence, it uses a biologically produced light in the cells. This can be used to treat diseases like epilepsy, sense low blood glucose levels, or enhance the quality of vascular control in the brain and body. Okay, moving on to medical technology. First, we'll look at bioluminescence resonance energy transfer, or BRET for short. This is a naturally occurring phenomenon, but it can also be used in a lab to monitor protein-to-protein interactions from bacterial cells to plant cells to mammalian cells. Okay, now let's look at bioluminescent activated destruction, or BAD for short. This builds upon the photodynamic theory that's effective against tumors that sit against the skin surface or on the lining of internal organs. Cancer cells are treated with the photosensitizer and exposed to light. The light triggers the production of active oxygen species that can then destroy cancer cells. Finally, let's look at bioluminescent imaging, or BLI. This allows for non-invasive imaging of biological processes. This can be used to locate tumors, study diseases and treatments, and track relative amounts of pathogens.
I would like to thank you for making it this far into our presentation. I know that was a lot of content to chew through, but I greatly appreciate it, and I couldn't have done this without the contributions of Kajal, the person that did the wonderful drawings and has the lovely speaking voice, and Isabel with the informative and equally as nice speaking voice. And I was just the guy that sat on the computer and put them together, and also put in the present stuff to the presentation. So I'd like to give a shout out to those two. And I'm German Saviano, the editor, and I would like to just say a bit of concluding remarks to in a onesie. So often bioluminescence is a deceptively simple phenomenon that is overshadowed by more impressive feats in the natural world like strength or speed, but its universal use is applied to everything from prey to predators to everything in between. In a world with light at our fingertips, it often becomes difficult for us to imagine life without it. We couldn't burn the midnight oil making presentation videos or party all night in onesies. But, through these creatures, through the process of bioluminescence, make their own light, of course, and their own lives. And, bioluminescence is a pretty lit subject, isn't it, huh? Yeah, it's a pretty lit, right, guys? It's pretty lit. I've been waiting so long to say that joke. Oh, it's lit. It's pretty lit, bro.